Hi, everyone. This is my research presentation for my Equity Magnum Opus for EDUU 607. So who am I? My name is N.Wood, and I'm currently a math intervention teacher at an elementary school in Redlands. I received my bachelor's degree in education back in 2010, and then went on to a completely different career. And after many years, I knew I wanted to be back into education. So I went back and received my credential. After that, I was a tutor, a long-term sub, and then kind of fell into math intervention. I didn't realize how much that I would love it so much, but I 100% feel completely aligned with my career and truly love what I do. So here are the key aspects of my presentation, and I'll make sure to go over one by one in detail. So the first one is the symphonic thinking. Symphonic thinking is looking at issues and situations with a different lens. As it relates to education, especially that of younger minds, it is keeping an open mind about teaching and learning, and then teaching kids to keep an open mind. It is modeling for students what creative thinking and problem solving and critical skills really are. Educators help students make meaningful connections and understand the why, and allow them to think outside the box. Symphonic thinking is about thinking differently, connecting prior knowledge, and digging deeper into the content. Two ways that symphonic thinking has empowered me, empowered a deeper understanding of equity for myself was both when I employed the first two street data tools. The first one was when I employed the equity participation tracker and viewed a math lesson of a colleague. I wasn't really sure what I was looking for, but after reviewing notes and realizing that certain voices, girls, were not being heard, and this directly related to test scores, this drove me to ask more questions. And then as I employed the second street data tool through a staff meeting, I realized that my administrators use symphonic thinking throughout our meetings, always listening to us and empowering us to make decisions that would better help our students. And this had me asking if these types of conversations and collaborations were happening in the classroom. And unfortunately, after I found out, after observing, generally speaking, they're not. So how does this relate to my understanding of equity? Well, I believe equitable education systems are not possible without symphonic thinking. Symphonic thinking is about digging deeper into the whys and the hows of certain aspects of teaching, asking the questions, and then doing the research to find out how it can be changed. If we want to employ equitable teaching practices, as Smith and Lindsay put it, we need to design lessons and curriculum to fit the needs of all students, allow students to hear and share stories, and drive meaningful connections to content, have empathy for all and teach empathy to students, and allow students to have fun in their education. Equity is about encouraging and celebrating differences between everyone, and symphonic thinking is how we can do that. So my definition of equity and how it relates to equality. So my definition of equity is centered around two things: individual student needs and awareness. And in the TED Talk by Rodney Robinson, he stated that not every student comes to school with the same abilities, resources, or knowledge. And it is our job as teachers to recognize this, but also to provide the resources needed to fill those gaps. Equity in education means removing barriers, setting high expectations for all students, providing what every student needs, encouraging differences, and getting to know the student holistically, meaning the student's physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual health. It means we have to view all aspects of a student's well-being and then make the proper accommodations to ensure we're providing the best setting for them to succeed. However, that can't happen unless we're aware of what's happening. We can't change anything if we're not aware of what needs to be changed. And as Saphir and Dugan put it, we need to acknowledge that our current teaching practices and curriculum are not conducive for all students to learn. And as stated on page 29, that we acknowledge our systems and practices and narratives are designed to perpetuate disparities in outcomes for marginalized students. It's about that awareness that we need. Equity is about realizing why achievement gaps exist, particularly in students of color and females, and then making the steps to correct the system as a whole. So how is it equity different than equality? Well, Saphir and Dugan talked about the equity traps and tropes, and these are the programs or strategies that education systems try to implement when wanting to provide more equitable teaching practices. But these programs fail to do so because the purposes behind implementing those programs are for the administration, not for the students. Equality is the constant falling into the traps and tropes, thinking that we're providing the correct opportunities because we're providing a Chromebook to every student, or we have books about Black Americans in our library. It's the surface level things that are equality, and this is how it is unlike equity. And Lindsay Ott talked about solving problems through equity, not equality. Equality is providing the same sorts and expecting the same results. In her TED Talk, she stated that we impose the same standards and provide the same sorts to a wide variety of groups, and we're not helping our students, but we're actually widening the achievement gap. Equality is assessing every student with one question exit ticket, asking them to show the one way that they know that they were taught to do it. Equity is allowing students to show what they know by explaining it, drawing it, using manipulatives to show it, or using the equation if desired. This is another example of how equity and equality are different. So my topic, my equity topic, what did I select and why? And so the topic I chose was gender gaps in STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. Really focusing on the fact that the lack of female presentation in STEM fields in higher education and in the labor force begins with elementary school. The stereotypes, teaching practices, cultural norms are preventing females from entering into the fields of STEM and are affecting female confidence and their ability to do STEM work, especially math. And the reason I chose this topic is because after reviewing the state data, the street data and the raw data from my school, it became clear that there's a large achievement gap between girls and boys in math. And through observing the lack of participation from girls during math class, to how teachers are using one method to teach and assess all students, to the vastly different math test scores between girls and boys, there was an obvious equity issue that needed to be addressed. And also this issue directly relates to the national and global data that shows a lack of female representation in STEM fields, as I will later show. And personally, I chose this topic because I am female, I am a math intervention teacher, but also I remember struggling with math when I was younger. I remember that feeling that boys are just better at math and that I was just not equipped with the abilities to do difficult math skills. I see now that I was always able to do it, but I never was able to give them the opportunity to show it. I really empathize with these girls who are capable, but are not given the opportunity to show what they know. So what is street data and what are the tools that I used? So reading through Saphir and Dugan's street data book, street data to me is three things: student and family input, purposeful observations, and qualitative data. That first one is asking students, deep questions about how they feel about their education, what is going right, what is going wrong, asking them to design lessons and assessments, and allowing students to truly reflect on their daily experiences. It is also incorporating family input on their students' education through surveys or conversations. And those observations, those purposeful observations, observing various classrooms and teaching practices, observing staff meetings, and allowing others to observe me as a teacher. And the observations need to be purposeful in that they are being done to see how students or staff are participating, who is participating, and how teachers and administrations respond to questions and input. And then that last part about qualitative data. Street data takes a qualitative approach to data collection, as the focus is not about test scores or grades. It's about the authentic desire to gather information from a source so that we may ask questions and then find out how to answer them. It is the data that seeks to answer questions such as how and why, and really tries to understand the human connections and the relationships. So what are the three street data tools that I used? The first one was the equity participation tracker. I chose this tool because it seemed like one of the easier ones to employ on short notice, and I could obtain data without changing the setting or the students' normal habits. I wanted this data to be as authentic as possible, and I wasn't quite sure what I was looking for at first. The intention was to see if I found anything about the teacher's practice that produced inequities within her classroom. The second tool I used was a structured meeting observation, where I attended a staff meeting and I took detailed notes on how the staff and administrators communicated through the meeting. I chose this tool because it was another tool that was easy to employ on short notice, but I also wanted to attend the meeting with a different lens than normal. I'm used to going to these meetings as, and viewing them as something that we have to do, or it's a time when our administrators are telling us what we need to do differently, or a new program they want to implement. This time I really, the intention was really to see the types of interactions that occur between teachers and administrators, to see if there were any inequitable practices that occurred within meetings. The third tool I used was the focus group interview, where I interviewed 4 girls from the same class that I observed in the first tool. And I used this tool because I wanted to find out how the girls felt about their math class and their teacher, and how they truly felt, how they related to math. And these girls are ones who I currently support with daily math intervention. They don't participate in whole group lessons, and they continually score low on tests. And I just wanted to see if they realized the same differences in female participation that I did. So what was learned regarding my equity topic, locally using those street data tools? So 3 things that I learned locally was, First, the lack of participation from girls during math class directly correlates with the math test scores. After I observed one class during math, I did it to with a few other teachers in a few other classrooms, and I found the same issue. Girls do not participate during math class, and the boys score significantly higher than girls on all tests. And our administration prides itself on providing students what they need, with those basic needs, showing them they care, showing them we love them and how special they are. And while all this is important, they're not showing us how to use equitable teaching practices such as universal design for learning, or project-based learning. In the staff meeting, we did a few project-based learning activities, which really helped us understand the topic better. But our administrators, aren't showing us how to use these strategies in the classroom. And the third thing was through my interview and daily interactions with the girls, I found that the problem isn't that the girls don't like math or that they're not capable. It's the fact that they aren't provided with what they need to succeed in math. I also found that the girls noticed that boys participate significantly more than them during math. The teaching practices are standard-based, one way to learn, one way to show, and one way to assess. And the teaching practices are not conducive to all learning styles, especially for girls who, as David Sousa puts it, typically learn and retain information when presented visually and concretely instead of symbolically. And Sousa continues on saying that boys of the same age typically have spatial awareness that's needed to process abstract concepts such as math equations. So what was learned regarding my equity topic on a national scale, and how was this information uncovered? So 3 things that I learned nationally. The first one was males outperform females on mathematics tests. According to the PISA results from 2018, 15-year-old males outperform females in mathematics by 9 points. Although not a lot, it still shows that boys outperform girls in the field of mathematics. In addition, the National Assessment of Education process shows lower scores for females every year from 1990 to 2019. The second thing I found was the rates of females graduating in STEM fields, especially in those advanced degrees, such as masters and doctorates, are significantly lower. As Prathi Senaviratne stated in her article, as of 2018, women make up about 50% of the graduating class in bachelor programs in STEM fields, and they also take up higher than 60% of degrees in biology, psychology, and social sciences, but they take up about 30% in mathematics, engineering, and computer science, most likely due to the amount of those advanced mathematics classes that are required. And Senaviratne, she continues on saying that they go to advanced degrees like master's and doctorate, but the percentage of females in those degrees takes a deep dive. So about 30% for masters and a little more than 20% for doctorate in those STEM fields. The third thing I found was the rates of females in STEM fields in the labor force are significantly lower, especially science and engineering. Excuse me. According to the 2022 data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, while women make up 49% of the total labor force, they only make up about 30% of the workforce in STEM fields. And as of 2019, the National Science Foundation states that women account for 16% in science and engineering jobs, 40% in mathematics, and 24% in computer science. Prathi Senaviratne also stated that in science-related jobs such as nursing, psychologists, and dental hygienists, they make up about 60%, which directly correlates with those graduation rates. Additionally, I found that, there are these cultural stereotypes that boys are better at math than girls. I read quite a bit about it, and how the AAUW, the American Association for the University of Women, how they put it is that teachers and families often underestimate girls' abilities in math starting as early as preschool. And our society also shows girls that they would be more fit in roles like teachers or nurses or even just moms, rather than mathematicians and engineers. Our society looks at the latter as male-dominated, and females being in those areas of work is kind of odd. This leads to a low self-efficacy in girls and their ability to do math. And I uncovered all this information through reading articles that referenced other articles, that reference tables, that reference more articles. And I really tried to stay with those government-owned websites and accredited organizations. And, as you read certain articles, they start referencing other things, and then you just kind of keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. So what was learned regarding the focus, the equity topic on a global scale, and how was this information uncovered? So 3 things I learned globally. similar to national, is that males outperform females on mathematics tests by an average of 5 points. And I looked at the PISA 2018 data from 8 different countries around the world and found that 6 of them, Australia, Brazil, France, Japan, United Kingdom, and Portugal, showed boys outperforming girls by an average of 8.5 points, which is similar to the United States, while the other 2, Finland and Philippines, showed that girls slightly outperformed boys in math. The second thing I found was rates of females graduating in STEM fields vary worldwide. For example, Saeed and Creed show that in Muslim countries, women actually make up 50% of STEM fields, and an even higher percentage in certain sciences and engineering fields. The reason behind this was pretty fascinating. You know, that the way that Saeed and Creed had said was women have typically lived in male-controlled society where females are looked upon as inferior to men. But in more recent years, they've really taken their education into their own hands and have a deep desire to be financially independent. And so they see these fields as a way out. And these may be one of the reasons that these numbers are very different than other countries. However, a study conducted by Verdugo Castro and a couple of other researchers show that in European countries, males heavily dominate STEM degrees in higher education, averaging about 70% males over females. Similarly, Anna Marie De Fillo of the Resource Foundation found that rates are similar in Latin America. That is, it is much more male dominated. And the final thing I found was rates of females in STEM fields in the labor force are lower, especially in those fields of mathematics and engineering. According to the International Labor Organization, the average percentage of females working in STEM fields worldwide is 40%, some countries being at 15% and others being at 44%. More specifically, as stated by the data by Catalyst, females in mathematics and engineering jobs tend to be on the lower end of the spectrum, averaging about 20 to 25%. And, something I found troubling was not the cultural stereotypes on a global scale. It was really the reasons that there is a lack of female representation in STEM. And according to UNICEF and the Resource Foundation, that they said that because the reason why there is a lack of female representation is because of domestic violence and poverty and child marriage and early pregnancies. So it's not so much that they can't do it, it's that they are forced to do other things. And again, I uncovered this information through reading articles. I tried to stay with articles that used data that wasn't more than 5 years. And then, like I said, as you read articles and books, you read the references and you gain even more ideas about how to look at more data. And I just took a deep dive into the statistics. I stayed with government-owned websites and accredited organizations. So what did I learn regarding my topic on all 3 levels, locally, nationally, globally, and what are the most important takeaways? So 3 things I've learned and the takeaways. The first thing is the importance of powering girls in STEM. Through this process and through the street data collection, I've realized how important it is for our societies to do a better job of encouraging girls to go into STEM fields. We need to show them that it's possible, and we need to give them the confidence to succeed in STEM fields throughout their lives. We do this by removing the stigma of girls that girls are not good at math. We talk about women in STEM. We address those stereotypes of women and men in STEM. And we provide information on what jobs there are in STEM and show them the wide variety of fields that are available to them. Additionally, even if they don't go into any STEM field, provide ample opportunities for them to practice life skills with STEM, showing them how important it is to understand the material, not just pass the test. The second thing I learned was the issue of females in STEM is a global issue, not just local. Although I had a feeling that the raw data was similar across the globe, I didn't quite understand the vast differences between the United States and Europe and Latin America, and how many men actually make up the STEM labor force. More specifically, the reasons behind the lack of female representation in STEM was extremely saddening. As UNICEF stated, not only do girls have less access to education, they're also more susceptible to poverty and child marriage and domestic violence. But organizations such as UNICEF, the AAUW, Catalyst, Society of Women Engineers, and the Association for Women in Science are all organizations that are working tirelessly to encourage and promote women in STEM nationally and globally. For myself, what I'm going to take away from this is I really want to reach out to one of these organizations and see about planning a Women in STEM event at my school, where women in various STEM fields come and talk to our students about their experiences and about their jobs. The third thing that I took away was that our local and national teaching practices are not providing equitable opportunities for students. I can't say this on an international scale, but on a national scale, the World Population Review shows that 40 of the 50 states have adopted the Common Core standards for math. And although these standards address many important aspects of useful mathematical skills, the information provided by Catherine Gurwitz shows that all 50 states are still requiring some type of standardized tests. And our school curriculum doesn't even address a large portion of the Common Core standards and has teachers teaching things that they aren't ready to learn or need to learn. Our teaching practices are focused on teaching the standard, teaching the skill, and passing the test. Our practices need to shift to providing students with opportunities to make more meaningful connections to the content, especially in math. As Sevier and Dugan stated, we need to stop being compliant and shift our teaching that guides a pedagogy of voice to students through reflections, questions, team building activities, project-based activities, and prioritizing feedback over grades. I have to start somewhere, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my students and then gradually show my colleagues how we can help our students have agency in their learning, just like Sevier and Dugan had talked about. So equity as a focal point, before this course versus now. And there's 3 specific ways in which viewing equity as a focal point has changed for me before and up until now. So effectively, prior to this course, I felt as though I had no say in how my school does things. I felt like my students, I had no say in what happens with our classrooms. I felt my voice wasn't big enough to make a change and that it was just too big of an issue for me to carry on my shoulders. So I didn't address it. However, after reading the small, meaningful ways from Saphir and Dugan through street data and providing students with a voice, I feel empowered to make a change within my school and perhaps within my community. And although the data about treatment of women across the world saddens me, it also fills me with joy knowing that there are organizations out there like UNICEF that are working every day to make a difference. And I feel like I can make a small difference within my school and my community. I just have to start small. So behaviorally, prior to this course, I did not say anything or provide suggestions to my administration, and I didn't really want to cause any strife between myself and my colleagues, especially because I'm still new to the school. I did my job, I helped students with math, and I continued my day. However, I know I can make a difference by starting small. I can employ street data tools, asking more questions of my students, help plan lessons with my teachers, and even teach a lesson to the class, showing them how project-based activities work. I don't have to point out, what teachers are doing wrong. Rather, I can just show them ways in which we can help students be more efficient in their learning. And cognitively, prior to this course, I truly didn't realize the amount of inequitable practices that were happening, especially to marginalized students, not at just my school, just in general. It wasn't a focal point in my practice because I thought that I was doing a pretty good job on providing what my students needed to succeed. I thought that our school was doing a great job on providing what our students need when they need it. I thought our nation was providing women in STEM, and I read about various organizations that were helping students get into STEM fields. I thought globally that other countries were getting rid of past practices that marginalize women. However, I now know differently. I understand how important it is to listen to our students and communities about their education experiences. The data proves that the lack of female representation in STEM is still happening all over the world. So what is my academic definition of equity and equality in education? Equity and equality in education is a lifelong commitment to a journey of improvement for myself, my students, my school, my community, my nation, and the world. It is a constant process of trying and failing, changing and readjusting, and reflecting and revisiting. It is metaphorically getting on the same level as my students, understanding their experiences, and deeply and actively listening to what they say about their education. And as Saphir and Dugan state, it is helping students gain agency in their learning, focusing on the mastery of knowledge, not the consuming of curriculum. It is fostering a sense of belonging for all students, providing ways to show them their knowledge in a variety of ways and celebrating their differences. And finally, it is a journey toward a better world for all of us, not just a box to check off on a to-get-done list. So revisiting symphonic thinking, connecting my prior knowledge and experiences, connecting all the readings that we did these past 8 weeks, making those meaningful and at times difficult connections, tying everything I've learned together, and realizing that this part of my learning process and my journey toward equity is just beginning. This entire experience has paved the way for my Equity Magnum Opus to be titled The Gender Gap in STEM, a Journey of Reimagining the Education System for Girls. As I stated before, equity and equality are a journey, not a destination. As Saphir and Dugan states, it is a commitment to reimagining the system in my situation for girls. There's an achievement gap between girls and boys, and it begins with our education system. My data has led me to understand how the education system fails girls year after year within most countries. We have to hit the redo button on our practice and focus on the strengths of our girls rather than the failures. We do this through a positive growth mindset that all girls are capable, and we need to reimagine our education system to provide a more equitable environment for our girls. It is a journey with our girls, not for them. If we try to change for them, then we will inevitably fall into those traps and tropes of equity that Saphir and Dugan warned us against. It has to be a journey with them. Here's a list of my references that I've used throughout this presentation. And that concludes my final presentation. Thank you so much.